All right. I should have panelists coming, participants. Yes. Okay. All right. Here are our. Okay. Hi, everybody. As our panelists come in, we'll get started in just a moment. Got a stream of attendees logging in. All right, I think we can get started. Welcome to everyone joining us for our conversation today on rebuilding after the shattering, cultivating resilience in solidarity. I'm so happy that you are all here with us today for this awesome panel conversation of House of Hope supporters, the community coming together to surround these kiddos at House of Hope in Eizariya, Palestine with love and support. So thank you everyone who's logging in to listen. So today, if you have any comments or questions that you'd like to ask the panelists as we get going, just feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm not gonna lie, this is my first time using Zoom webinar. I've only ever used Zoom meetings, so I feel a little bit new at it. So if I miss something, just raise your hand and say, Thea, you're missing my question. So you all know I'm Thea Lavin. I'm the managing director of Supporting Hope, the U.S. nonprofit devoted to supporting House of Hope Vision School in Eizariya, Palestine. Our panel today, we have Milad Vosgueritchian, the chairman of Vision Association for Culture and Arts in Eizariya, co-founder of its House of Hope Vision School, and founding partner of Supporting Hope. Milad is an educator, community organizer, and NGO director with proven expertise in nurturing change makers. In and out of the classroom, Milad has inspired Palestinian youth to embrace nonviolence, built bridges between estranged Jewish and Palestinian communities, and put vocational training within reach for low-income Palestinian women. Milad is also on the board of directors for Shir, the Palestinian National Nonviolence Movement. And I apologize for my crappy American accent when I pronounce Shir. Could you say it, Milad?
Tagir.
Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, awesome.
Beautiful Arabic language, and
this is our shibboleth test, so we know if you know Arabic really hardcore now.
Yes. I think Greer Johnston, who our social media director, is listening, and she's learning Arabic also, and she can. We both tried pronouncing that name correctly. So next on the list is Aziz Abu Sarah, Palestinian, born in Eizariya, the community we serve in the West Bank, and raised in Jerusalem. Aziz, your journey from a radical seeking revenge to a peacemaker seeking reconciliation has led to an innovative method of peacemaking. You have harnessed the transformative power of travel. You co-founded Mejdi Tours in 2009, which has originated the dual narrative form of tourism in Israel-Palestine. And you are a leader of socially conscious travel. Aziz's educational and conflict resolution work throughout the world has earned you the titles of National Geographic Explorer and TED Fellow. You've written opinion pieces for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Al-Quds, Haaretz, and have been published by the National Geographic, CNN, TED, and Al Arabiya. We are so happy that you are here with us today. Thank you for joining the conversation. Also so delighted and honored to introduce my Rabbi Ariel Stone, who has been the spiritual leader of Congregation Shir Tikvah in Portland, Oregon, since its founding in 2002. She's a caring and vibrant leader. Rabbi Ariel, you are an exceptionally knowledgeable teacher of Torah and a recognized scholar of Jewish mysticism. Rabbi Ariel is a founding supporter of House of Hope since day one. It's been integral in our success and is a member of the Vision Community Advisory Board. And she's also a convener of the Portland Interfaith Clergy Resistance and an activist for police abolition in the United States. Also, so thrilled to have with us Pastor Ali Hassan, who is the transitional pastor of the First Covenant Church of Eureka. After working for 33 years in the aerospace industry while serving at various churches, you now serve the kingdom of God by encouraging and exhorting others to live out the gospel. And you, Pastor Ali, we are also so fortunate to have you as a member of our Vision Community Advisory Board as well, alongside Rabbi Ariel. So thank you all for joining us today in our conversation. So, just to get started, May was a deeply troubling and traumatizing month of violence. Our children in Eizariya and Abu Dis in the West Bank at House of Hope were on the front lines experiencing the trauma as it unfolded. So I know that all of us on this call, Milad, are just very eager to hear how are the children doing in the aftermath of the violence. How are the kids doing?
Great, and thank you, Tia, for the introduction. And I'm really happy to be with Aziz and Rabbi Ariel and Pastor Ali, and myself too. I mean, when it comes to Palestinian kids, it's not easy. Maybe Aziz, he lived his childhood in the same village, and also the kids of House of Hope. I mean, they have not just trauma. I mean, the challenge between us as educators and them, we both share the same, trauma, but it depends the level of trauma. I mean, we have the oppression from one side, we have the indirect oppression. I mean, when we have the separation war, we have the wars. The war against also civilians in Gaza. I mean, this continuous, suffer and struggle, it causes a lot of damage. I mean, sometimes when I walk in the school, in the streets of Eizariya, the neighborhood, and I see also my own kids. I have my son is 10 years and my daughter is 7 years, and also my daughter is a special need. So I totally see myself in a way in their anger. I totally see myself in their frustration, and I totally see the pain. I mean, it all goes to the level of freedom. I mean, these kids, the kids of Eizariya, the kids of our community, the kids of Jerusalem, the kids of Beit Hanina, the kids of Silwan, the same kids, but it depends where exactly they live and their connection to trauma. Silwan different, House of Hope kids or House of Hope school kids, they are lucky. I say they are lucky to have or to be in this. Let's say we always talk about the beloved community, to be in this community that they can share. And Aziz knows the traditional school in Palestine, the government, the private, the violence inside between the teachers and the kids. We are lucky, as I always say, that this school also contain this anger, this fears, this struggle, the continuous, pain inside them. And this all goes also to continuous, oppression and fear at nights and in the mornings or any second. And we saw like the escalation when the war happens to Gaza. We saw, I could feel, how easily the kids, because social media, we are connected to social media. The parents are stressful all the time. The news 24 hours at home. So it also, you can feel their bodies, their mental health, the way that they act between one another. So it affects, I mean, but, I always say, I mean, when we come with love, when we come with this, maybe the non-prophets, I mean, not just prophets, I mean, but for me, like, I call them also other prophets like Gandhi, Abdul Ghaffar Khan, I mean, MLK, I mean, they talk about a weapon that no one can defeat. And so I can end easily. This weapon is about, it talks about love, faith, and to be steadfast. I mean, so this is like the thing that we as a school try to equip these kids. I mean, it's not easy to talk about love, and there's a lot of hate in the atmosphere, and the Palestinian community, I mean, it's kind of a balloon that will explode any time, because we don't want to talk about why they reached this point, but mainly the lack of freedom, the lack of justice, the lack of love. Everywhere there is like violence, so it affects their lives negatively.
Thanks, Milad, for sharing. Yeah, thanks for letting us know, how it's been and what's going on at the school. And if anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to just enter them in the Q&A. And also, Pastor Ali, Rabbi, Ariel, and Aziz, if you have any follow-up questions, please jump in. All right, so Aziz, you yourself grew up in Eizariya, in the village of the House of Hope serves. You were there in May as the violence escalated out of control and during the aggression, and you were a direct witness to these traumatic events. You yourself grew up, during the first and second Intifada. You experienced the construction of the separation wall and the loss of Palestinian land to settlements. How are Palestinian youth today reacting to these traumatic events and expressing themselves differently than when you were a young boy and young man in the same area?
Thank you, Thea. Thank you, Milad. Actually, when you mentioned the construction of the wall, I was just reminded, because Milad's house and the school is right over the wall. And in those times, I remember when we used to meet in Jerusalem. I lived in Jerusalem when the wall was being built, and Milad Nubar, his brother, who's also a very dear friend, would come to meet me in Jerusalem. And I remember when that became literally impossible. And when the wall was, as the wall was being built, jumping over it and being able to come. And eventually, as it was fully constructed, where relationships, I think, many relationships were lost because you couldn't meet anymore. And that's, there are many aspects of that separation and that reality. And that's true for kids who eventually lose contact with family, lose contact. We're not the people who, those in the West Bank are different than those in Jerusalem, are different than those in Haifa and Jaffa. We are all one people. We all have relatives all across the country. I have relatives who live in Taibe in Israel. I have relatives in Jerusalem. I have relatives in Hebron. I have relatives in all in Ramallah, all across the country. And those walls are not set in a way where, you are with your family. It separates you from your friends, your family, your relationships. And so I even remember how we couldn't meet as much because of that. And it meant I had more to go to the West Bank, and they couldn't anymore access Jerusalem, which is the case for many kids now in Eizariya. Some of them never seen a beach. Some of them, and you're talking about an hour away, some of them never been to Jerusalem. And it's crazy to think about it. Just for those who don't know how far Eizariya is from Jerusalem, it's walking distance. We're not talking about a place that's like miles and miles away. It's 2 miles away from Jerusalem. And yet the reality is you don't have that access, and that the social structure of our community suffers as a result of it. So that's one difference. When I grew up, Yes, there was occupation, there was many issues, but at least you could go around and still have that bond, where today it's much harder to have that relationship, that connection. I think it makes it much rougher for those children growing up today. The youth, I think what I noticed in my last time in Jerusalem in May was kind of encouraging, actually, because since the first Intifada, I would argue, I have not seen Palestinian youth mobilize, not out of a political party, not Fatah, not Hamas, not Jabha, but really mobilize for a cause, and seeing that our cause is, we are united in this cause. And the cause in this case in Jerusalem is the displacement of families there. And seeing that mobilization has been really uplifting, I think, for me, seeing people 18 years old, 20 years old coming together, protesting, non-violently protesting in Sheikh Jarrah, even when they are met with quite a lot of violence, they are still doing non-violence. I've seen joint Israeli-Palestinian protests run by youth as well, groups like Combatants for Peace, which is another amazing organization I'm sure Milad is aware of. Meeting together, protesting, getting arrested together, Israelis and Palestinians for what I would call co-resistance is another good thing. But also, it's one common thing we have is many of these youth, even some in their early teen years, are being arrested, and the trauma of being arrested when you're 12, 13, 14, or being shot at is something that stays with you forever. I still remember first time I was shot at, and it's a memory. I was, I think, 8 years old then, but it's a memory that never leaves you. I think some people are doing things I never imagined would happen again. Like when I was a kid, and I don't know, Milad, if you experienced this, like we would walk around with an onion with us, because if we shot at tear gas, you have an onion to put it close to your nose, so we'll save you. And it's not a normal thing. No kid should walk around with an onion. This is a trauma that often people don't think about. And that's happening again today, because the chances of you being fired at tear gas anywhere in Jerusalem or the West Bank, it becomes more likely. So these are the realities that are similar, some of the differences. But I think I'm very helpful. I'm very helpful that people like Milad stay in Palestine, and it's much easier to choose to get out and to leave um, and to not really care, to stay in Eizariya and care about the kids there. It's my hometown, so I have a lot of connection to it. I'm very grateful for that somebody is doing the work that he's doing. And I know Milad since he was, I mean, I was also a teenager when I met him, but I know him for quite a long time, and I don't know many people who have as good of a heart and care and passion for Palestinians, for people, not just Palestinians, for anyone as he does, and same for his lovely wife as well.
Thank you, Aziz. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. Kind of building off of what you just shared about the mobilization and the protest, nonviolent protest amongst youth is growing in Palestine, West Bank, Jerusalem, and that's really encouraging. Also, what do you think Palestinian youth today, growing up under occupation, want? What do you think their biggest desires and wants are?
What can you repeat the last sentence? I lost the connection the last minute.
What do Palestinian youth want today?
I think most than anything is having hope. I think having equality and having freedom. Those are the three things that come to me. Hope that they can have those things. They can live like normal, like any other youth anywhere in the world, have dreams that they can achieve. Too many of the young people I talk to in Jerusalem gave up on those dreams, thinking it's impossible, of what they can achieve, what they can do. And then freedom, being able to travel around, being able to do what they want to do, being able to live without fear. You know, often when I talk to people, say Israelis want security and Palestinians want freedom. That's not fully accurate, because also Palestinians want security. The fear I have even now, thinking of my nephews and my cousins in Jerusalem, and every day when everything is going on, or in the West Bank, it's terrifying to live like this, and it messes up with your brain. So having security, having freedom, and having equality, not to be inferior to anybody else, not to another Palestinian, not to an Israeli, not to somebody from a different faith, but to be really equal. Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whoever you are, be really equal, regardless if we end up with one state, with two states, we can argue that. But regardless of which solution we end up with, equality is something that I believe every Palestinian wants.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that, and my Palestinian friends in the West Bank, I often hear them saying that they feel security is a primary need that they have. Safety and security is something that I hear very frequently. Thank you for your thoughts. And you know, our topic of this conversation is cultivating collective resilience in the face of ongoing trauma. Many of the people listening in on this call, certainly all of the panelists, have been either suffering the occupation, living in the occupation, or be an ally for a long time. And you know, how we support each other to remain resilient and continue on over the years, as this you know, solution is not fast. At House of Hope, we believe that safety for anyone and everyone comes through solidarity. And we also believe that we find hope and strength outside of our individual selves, in our beloved community. And Rabbi Ariel, you are a member of our beloved community. You've lived in Jerusalem and have been a leading voice in the global conversation about human rights and self-determination for all people living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. During each wave of violence over the past 20, 30, you know, 40 years, how have you avoided burnout? You know, one thing out here in the United States, that we have the opportunity to tune it out and look away. And, you know, how have you avoided doing that through burnout, and how do you encourage your congregants to not do that?
So I would start by saying I have been so privileged to work with people who are so inspiring, and Milad is among them, and Manar as well, that one of the ways one can keep oneself from wondering whether one's own acts are worthwhile is simply to remember that the self is not an adequate measure of anything worthwhile. Human beings are not built to be individuals. Our strength comes from each other. And that literally comes down to the ability to keep your heart and your spirit open so that you can receive the nourishment from the people around you who have energy on the day you don't, or whose words you remember on a day when you're not so clear about your own words. That's one reason why I believe that House of Hope has encouraged its children to look at great icons of hope in the human past, right? None of us contains what we need to hold our own self together. We are not individuals. We may be individuated from a collective in our tastes, but or in what colors we like, but in every important way, we are utterly, utterly dependent on each other. So the question becomes, if we know we're dependent on each other, how do we know where to lean when we seem to be surrounded by people we don't trust, or who scare us, or who we've been traumatized by, or whom we've been taught to fear? How do you not fall into the trap of seeing some people as less human than you are, right? I believe that if we stay focused on our own need for inspiration, and on our common humanity with all other human beings, then we don't have to worry about burnout. I think, by the way, burnout is a privilege. Burnout is not a reality. Burnout is to me, burnout is a convenient excuse for discouragement or despair. I find that especially in the Western world, people don't use the words that most accurately reflect their real condition. They're not schooled to do that. They're not schooled to say, I am feeling despair about the path I'm on. Rather, they say, oh, I'm burned out, I need a break. It's total nonsense. Nobody burns out. Nobody has batteries to recharge either. We need to learn how to talk about ourselves as human beings, not as machines and not as candles. We can't hold ourselves up. We have to connect to other people. Here's the real challenge. If empathy is a major way to connect to other people, if a sense that someone else is like you on a basic level is almost a necessary precondition for reaching out to someone and wanting to help them, what do you do when you don't know how to help somebody, or you've been told you can't help somebody, or there's a wall in the way? How do you overcome all of the things that have been put in your way so that people who have power can stay in power? Which, by the way, is a perennial human problem. It's true from Jeremiah, it's true down to Gandhi, and everywhere in between. Some people have power and they don't care about you and me or our humanity because it gets in the way of their keeping their power. For the rest of us, whose hearts are still open enough to want to know how to get along, to make friends with people who aren't like us, because we see peace is better than war, security is better than fear. All of us have this challenge. How do you reach out despite disagreement? How do you reach out despite fear? How do you feel that another person is just like you when you have very little to go on? And I want to make the argument from my tradition that, see, and here's the part that as a Jew comes back and frustrates me over and over again. And the reason why I am still doing this work, and I will continue to do this work, because as far as I'm concerned, I can't be Jewish without doing this work. Because in my sacred scriptures, it literally says, I don't care if you like this person or not. If you see them fallen down, you must stop to raise them. There's lots of places where we're told, love the stranger, empathize with the stranger, for you are a stranger. But my favorite ethic is, if you see your enemy's ass fallen by the road, you must stop and raise it with him. Not your friend. Someone who you don't have empathy with. If you follow a just path, then you must do justice on that path. It does not matter whether you like the person. It does not matter whether the person agrees with you. Justice is justice. Everyone deserves to live free, equal, safe, thriving, cared about, and loved lives. It doesn't mean we have to all agree. It doesn't mean we have to be friends. That is a higher bar I would like for us to get to. But it seems that our future on this planet has always been about whether we can overcome our fear. Our future now on this planet has to also overcome the ways we've been taught to hate each other deliberately. In the 1980s, I made friends with a Palestinian man, Faiz, who spoke fluent Hebrew. We spoke in Hebrew. When I met Milad, I came to Jerusalem. We had met in Portland, Oregon, but then I came to Jerusalem. I jumped in a cab. I called Milad and I said to him in rapid fire Hebrew, Milad, I'm here. You have to explain to the taxi driver how to get to you. And he said to me in English, I don't speak Hebrew. So number one, you could say, well, how terribly, insensitive she is to expect him to speak the language of the conqueror. That's not what I was thinking. What I was thinking about was back in the day, there was so much back and forth. Most of the Israelis I know spoke some Arabic, and most of the Arabs I know spoke some Jewish, some Hebrew. And that was how you got along, because there was lots of commerce. There were lots of relationships. This was before the first Intifada. I lived in the old city of Jerusalem, a place that I'm attached to with all my soul. Milad, please send more photos on the Instagram of the old city of Jerusalem, because every one of them makes me feel so good. It's deliberate. The walls that are being set down between us are deliberate. The less we know each other, the less we can speak each other's languages, the less we can communicate past the fear and get to the donkey that needs to be raised. I'm keeping my focus on that which is just, because that is what I expect from me and from people who are following me. And when I meet someone else who resonates on that level, then it doesn't matter. I don't need to ask you how you feel about any politics, because we're talking about children now, and we're talking about human life. And we're talking about people like Milad and Manar and the teachers and what they see. And everything else falls away, at least for that little bit of time. There's no way I could get burned out when I have that vision always in front of me. Now, that has nothing to do, and I am shutting up now, but I just want to leave this open door at the end of that comment, because this is related but a different question. That has nothing to do with the kind of pressure right now in the United States from all the non-Jews who don't understand anything about the Middle East, and out of their frustration are not learning, rather they are attacking Jews. They have no way of understanding the difference between Jews and Bibi Netanyahu, Jews and the state of Israel. And it is not an easy time for us. And that is also not a reason to keep your eye on justice.
Thank you, Rabbi Ariel. Thank you so much for that. And so, just building off of what you just said about, and, so many great points there. Thank you about reaching out to the other, that if our enemy is fallen by the side of the road, we are commanded to assist them and help them, that this is our calling. So just thinking about what we're all doing here at House of Hope for these kids. And when the trauma is too big, is it fair for us to ask them to still reach out and to still to engage in that? So I'm just thinking of a dear friend of mine who is a parent of a House of Hope child, and she was pregnant 4 or 5 months, and she was bleeding, and she needed to get to Jerusalem, and they stopped her at the checkpoint for hours as there was blood trickling down her leg. She did not lose her child, thank God, but what are we asking these kids, and what are we asking these parents? What do we do when the trauma that they're facing is so big? I don't know, so I'm now going to ask the panelists, what do we do? So Milad or Aziz or Pastor Ali or Rabbi.
Aziz, you want to share?
Yeah, I can definitely. I wanted to give somebody else a chance who maybe haven't spoken, but I think the reason we act isn't because we're not oppressed, then we act. I think in some ways, I don't see it, because of what we're going on, you can't reach out. I see it totally differently. So I'll say it from my own story. My brother was killed by torture from Israeli soldiers when I was 10 years old and he was 19. And so I grew up very angry, and I grew up in this place of, I can't reach out. I'm not going to talk to even an Israeli. I refused to learn Hebrew, even in my high school, and it was mandatory. And I did all of that out of a place where I thought I was seeking justice. And I was convinced that this is what I was doing. And I was very angry. I wanted the people who killed my brother to pay for killing him. And that's in some ways a natural feeling. But eventually, as I went through my own transformation, I realized that being angry and not wanting to do this engagement to make a change, I was being a slave to the person who killed my brother. I was letting that person control my life. I was letting him not only destroying my brother's life, but destroying mine as well. I realized that even though I thought I was seeking justice, in reality, I was seeking revenge. And the line between these two is quite a thin, thin line. We all think we're seeking justice when in reality, most of us, unfortunately, go after revenge. So knowing this, it changed the whole paradigm for me. So when I look at working, I haven't met Rabbi Ariel before, but I can see we are allies. And so I don't see us really on opposite sides. I don't see Israelis versus Palestinians anymore. I see it as those of us who seek justice, who seek security, who seeks equality, end of hostilities, end of occupation. I see us all on the same side. I don't care what your religion, what your politics, what your ethnicity, what your race, color, whatever we want to have all these divisions. It doesn't really matter. We are on the same side. And only through building such coalitions are we able to make a difference, I think, on the ground. So it's those of us who are for peace and justice, for end of the occupation, versus those who are not there, and I hope not there yet. And we can together work on getting everyone to be for justice instead of being for my team, which is my team is Arab or my team is Jewish. I think our team should be one, which is a team that seeks justice.
For me, I mean, it's like it also reminds me with my mom, because I couldn't see my mom, and she was maybe 5 minutes, and Aziz knows the hospital. Mutala, she had a severe cancer, and I didn't have the chance to meet her. I mean, it was maybe the last moment after we asked. I don't know what is the name of the paper, but kind of you ask mercy from your oppressor to go to Jerusalem. I mean, and we wrote a paper for the army that our mom, and we have to see her. But also that anger, I remember when I was in Budapest. I mean, my mom, she passed away in 2008, and I had that night. I mean, it was like all my tears, my anger. I mean, and the question was for me. I mean, if I gonna continue. I mean, living with that anger and hate. Or I should look for something else. Until now, I mean, I see. Even though I'm in the process of healing, I'm not healed from anger. I'm healed from hatred. But at the same time, I see it in my son. I mean, when he says sometimes, because the concept in Palestine, the Jews, not Israelis. I mean, for the kids, if you ask any kids in Palestine who is like your oppressor, he will say Jews. I mean, so even though our problem is like with the Zionism, but when I go to my son and I see like his anger at the soldiers, I mean, he expressed it. I don't like them. I hate them. I mean, so, and it also goes when he shares about his problems with his friends. I mean, so in his mentality as a child, I mean, he has an enemy. I mean, in his, and we grow up in, as me and Aziz, in this neighborhood. I mean, when we fight, it's not about me as a Palestinian Muslim and my brother or my neighbor as a Palestinian Muslim or Christian. It's like my brother become an enemy. I mean, this debate, I mean, between, I mean, the good and the bad, I mean, peace and justice. And I remember through my life when I was reading, I mean, also the Bible, I mean, and I believe like the Old Testament, the Tanakh, or any faith in Islam, all the time they talk about righteousness before justice. If we're gonna seek justice as Milad, I mean, and we don't have righteousness, so I believe that the kids of this school, I mean, the kids that we are trying to educate them, because this is not just education, it's kind of therapeutic healing through education. I mean, because here, I mean, we never talked about, I mean, anger in all our schools. I mean, till now, I mean, in the Palestinian governments, they have solutions and solutions and solutions, but on the ground, there is no solution in the Palestinian schools how to deal with anger. I mean, and for me, I mean, I'm so happy and I'm so blessed. I mean, that through the solidarity that we have through friends in the world, that we could build a new narrative. I mean, a new way, a new skills, a new path for these kids to seek freedom, dignity, and justice. And when I say freedom and dignity and justice, we don't take it from our oppressor, we live it. And this is a good thing, why sometimes people ask Palestinians, teach us how you as young and as adults and as old and as kids, even though you have frustration, and as he's talked about dreams and hope, from where you get your hope? I mean, from where you as a nation till now, I mean, I'm now 38 years old, and tomorrow my wife, she has something in her university, and she asked me, do you want to come to see? I told her no, not because I hate Israelis, but because if I want to be with my wife in her university, I want to feel that I have real dignity and freedom, and not going through a checkpoint and through a permit. So I told her, celebrate, I'm with you in my spirit. I want to be in my home with my kids, because, you know, it's complicated. It's very complicated. I mean, how we live as people in Palestine, how our kids also, they live in Palestine. So to move them, to mobilize them from this point, I mean, from 0 point of hate to a point that they can talk and express. It needs time and it needs healing. And also our educators, still we have a huge work with them. I mean, and Aziz knows, I mean, like the old people, they have the same mentality, the old school of mentality of our parents. I mean, they are one way. I'm happy to hear Aziz to talk about the coexistence, or like, it's good, you know, with competence, with for peace. I mean, I have a lot of friends, and when I see them, you know, I feel like there is a hope. And when I saw like our young youth, I mean, they are fed up. I mean, they are fed up with injustice. I mean, so I hope, I mean, through also Aziz, through Rabbi, Ariel, through Ali, through Thea, through this big beloved community and network, we will help our kids and our youth in Palestine to reach a level of justice inside them, and the way that they should seek and fight for it in non-violent ways.
I really appreciate that, Milad. It just warms my heart. I'm so encouraged. I wanted to make a comment, and I consider it such a privilege to be on this special panel with all of you, because all of you are resonating in my heart. I want to take you back to something that happened here in the United States in 2006, I think it was. You've probably heard of the shooting that occurred with a guy who went in an Amish community in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and killed the children at the schoolhouse. And it was horrific crime. This unprecedented, just to go in and just shoot kids at the schoolyard. And what was interesting to me, and I found it incredibly, it just shocked me, was not so much, it was bad enough, the story itself, but it was the after story. The fact that the Amish community gathered and they decided to, with intentionality, collectively, to forgive the shooter. They went to the families of the shooter and prayed with them and just offered just forgiveness. And it is so counterintuitive. It is so not the way that we are wired as human beings. And so I've come away with a mindset over the years that what God is doing is God is trying to get us to a place of understanding that we have to move from that place of retaliatory or that place where we would want to tit for tat and simply just, how do I get to a place of removing the anger, removing the spirit of unforgiveness, and going beyond. And the beyond means that I've got to do something that does not make sense, because in my heart of hearts, I would say, take that guy and put him in the gas chamber. And then after you finish with him, then hang him. And then after you do that, then take him out and shoot him. See, that's where I would want to go in my human frustration, anger. Just one time wouldn't be enough. But we're called to be in this place where, how do we go beyond? And how do we demonstrate love? How do we demonstrate? Because what we really want to do is, I think you want to forgive. And that opens the door to reconciliation. I see that as something that needs to come together, especially for children. A lot of us as adults, I don't know, I'm not that hopeful, to be honest with you, that we're going to get there, because there's such deep-seated hatred and stuff that we tend to let just marinate within our souls. And so we don't let stuff go so fast. But we have an opportunity to do something different with the kids. That's why I'm so encouraged with what Milad and Minar, what you guys are doing at the Vision of Hope. It's you have an opportunity to plant seeds with these kids, and they will grow up doing something different. And that's where I'm looking. How do we plant seeds of reconciliation, seeds of forgiveness, seeds that ultimately will grow and bring about real healing? Because now these kids will grow up and be parents and grandparents when I'm long gone, and they will be the ones that'll be dealing with the anger and all the other stuff, and they will have the tools necessary to cope with it. It was a 9-year-old girl, Judea, I believe her name is Judea Reynolds, that was a 9-year-old that witnessed the death of George Floyd. And they used her, the prosecution used her in the court. And it was a powerful picture, because what they did, basically, the district attorney said, if a 9-year-old knew that it was wrong, then that should say something about the egregious nature of this. But my concern is the effect on that 9-year-old and the other ones that were watching. Long after people have forgotten about it, what will that 9-year-old, will there be a spirit of reconciliation and healing going forward? Will her children, if she should have children, will they just hear the story and become kind of entrenched in hatred? Or will they actually grow up with a sense of reconciliation? How do I go across the aisle and begin to say, how do we get past this?
Thank you, Pastor Ali. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we're getting towards the top of the hour, and I wanted to make sure, Milad, there's a question from the audience and also one that I had about the vision ahead for the children of House of Hope. Gail, you mentioned, are wondering whether Milad could give a brief overview of the school right now, highlights and goals, and same question from me, what's happening at the school? How are you guys, building the world that we all want to live in? and especially this summer, what's happening with the camp with the Tajir and the teacher training.
Okay. With the school, I mean, it wasn't an easy year because of the corona, but we finished the school. Our kids are, I mean, even though we had a lot of here and there some conflicts, but I mean, our kids normally are safe from corona, from the army. I mean, the situation now is calm and calmer. Hopefully, it will be calm and calmer. Now we are we will have 2 summer schools. We started our first summer schools. We called it because we want to do a connection with Jerusalem and the whole, I mean, normally conflict, it's all about Jerusalem. So we mentioned the name of the camp is Children of Jerusalem. So we have till now 35. Normally our summer schools are funded a fee, but I mean we hope in this week we'll have 50 kids. I mean this is the good vibe in the summer, and you know, in this area we had a lot of also summer camps, so we are lucky to have 35 kids. Also, last 2 weeks we had 2 trainers from Israel. I mean, they are Palestinians, and one is Swiss. Also, her husband is an Israeli. Her name is Stephanie, and Lena Nasrallah and Aida. They came and we had a wonderful training. And I don't know if Aziz knows that we are the first Waldorf kindergarten. I mean, hopefully by years it will go through Manar to the first grade and second grade. And the good news that this year we will have the 5th grade opening, inshallah. We are fighting with our difficult government in the PA. Hopefully we will win to have the 5th grade. So the training with the teachers were fantastic. I mean, we are trying to pour, I mean, in Christianity, maybe the Holy Spirit, I mean, in Judaism, wherever, I mean, to pour something inside their hearts and minds, so they will change from the typical traditional local school into, I mean, the values of Steiner and to them, because we want to make our school the first model in the West Bank, and hopefully in the future in Gaza, to be a school for Waldorf and a non-violent education that hold in her curriculum and in its vision and mission, the non-violence, the non-violent communication and the non-violence education. So and the last thing that I want to share, that I am with the Tahrir movement. Maybe I don't know if Rabbi Ariel knows about Ali Bahouad. I'm also like a simple activist with them. I'm also coordinating one project with the Germans regarding how our youth will develop and initiate initiatives in the Palestinian communities, and also where villages and towns are threatened by settlers, especially in the south, in Susia, and some villages that they suffer a lot from the attacks of settlers. So my initiative will be 3 parts, because they will fund maybe 3,000 shekel. It is like simple fund, I mean, from the Germans, that I will hold in the school. It will be my initiative 3 parts. The first part, I call it Children's of Candy. We will have 3 days, a non-violent camp in our schools for the 3rd and 4th grade. So we are trying to educate also in summer. The second part, I will give non-violent education to our teachers. Manar, she will give the Waldorf education in the Palestinian curriculum. And we will bring one friend from Jericho. His name is Saleh. Also, he gonna work with them, women, to be like more free in the body and to have ice breaking game and building trust and the team. And the third one, we will bring an artist from Abu Dis. It's our neighbor village or town today. His name Muhammad Sabri. He will do like the faces of Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Arafat, Mahmoud Darwish. So, and also their statements. It's very important. Also, MLK, very important. Also, it's very important for the community when they come to the school to feel, I mean, not just to see, to feel and to see, like, and to ask themselves why we have Gandhi. Who is this man? He's not Muslim, he's not Jew, he's not Christian. I mean, so this, you know, the word starts with a question. And God also asked Adam and Eve, where are you? I mean, everything it's about question. And if you love someone, you ask her hand or his hand. So, and I hope Aziz, I tried to invite Aziz many times, but he was busy. He has to come. Aziz, you have, when you come back to Palestine, Israel, it's a privilege to you because it's your town, it's your village at the beginning, and now it's a town. And to see like one of the schools, unique schools, I mean, in Bethany. So hopefully our vision, to finish my words, that the model of House of Vision School, it will be in each town and village until we reach Gaza. For me now, my dream, it's not just to see my kids with Israeli kids or Jewish kids in the world, but also to build a Gaza in education and to have the first, maybe a school, a big school, that also it will help the kids in Gaza to have a therapeutic education and healing and reconciliation and forgiveness. And thank you, Pastor Ali, because normally when I deal with, because in our school, it's like mainly Muslim kids. So the only thing that when I talk about love, I talk about forgiveness. I mean, because sometimes they fight or they disagree or they, you know, I'm the right, he's the wrong. For me, I normally, and Aziz, he knows, like the word of forgiveness, it's not an easy word in Muslim community, because God forgives your sins. But we say, like, we can use samho, you know, samho and fillo, maybe Aziz can interpret the word, but I mean, sometimes it's like it can misunderstand. It can lead, but you know, we try to work on the forgiveness, the concept of forgiveness between kids, because it's very, 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 very important, and it will lead to healing and love and empathy. And thank you.
Thank you, Milad, for sharing that, all the exciting stuff that's happening at House of Hope. You know, you shared about the cross-border Waldorf teacher training that we just facilitated at this school, funded by a $10,000 Davis Peace Foundation grant that we received. And your work with Tajir and the Nonviolent Summer Camp and all the other initiatives that you're doing with them. And also people remember the art studio that we fundraised and this winter has been constructed. So we're excited to share photos and videos of that soon. One other thing that I wanted to mention.
Yeah, we're trying to make the art studio.
Yes, there it is. There it is. Yes. Two other things.
I mean, it is still, I mean, we are trying to build it. I mean, what?
Yeah. Exciting, very exciting. Two other quick things. One, Palestine Beats. We have a new teen program that we're rolling out. We received grant funding from the Empathy Fund to seed this program. We are going to be teaching beat making and rapping to youth from Eizariya, and alongside nonviolent communication. So they'll be learning how to make beats on the computer and then put their rap on top of it. This is for teens and young adults. And then Milad will be teaching them nonviolent communication that they will use to give feedback to each other on their music. So that's very cool. Everyone will be hearing more about that in the summer. We're going to have a virtual concert in August. So that's going on. So we have a new teen nonviolent education program, music program. Also, you mentioned we want to scale. We want in a decade and 2 decades, we want there to be House of Hopes all over the West Bank, all over Gaza. We want to influence the Palestinian Authority and Ministry of Education so that our pedagogy is in more public schools. one way that we do that is with data. Who likes data? I do. I'm an American. I love data. So in this fall, we have worked with phenomenal social scientists who is helping us design a proper study of our children and the impact that our education is having on them. And if the education at House of Hope reduces the symptoms of toxic stress and trauma exposure, those symptoms that we know that the medical establishment tells us are obstacles to learning. So we will be launching our study this September, and it's going to happen year over year. And within a year's time, we should have our first data that proves that it's not just what we hear when we visit House of Hope. We talk to the parents, we talk to the teachers who tell us about the improvement in children. They come in not speaking when they get to House of Hope. They come in shut down. Their anger is a huge problem. By the end of the year, they're improved significantly. We won't just have our stories, we're going to have data. And so with that, we're excited for some systemic change to come. So we're at the top of the hour. Panelists, would you like to continue with another question or two, or do you have to go?
Unfortunately, I have to go train a group of activists in another city in Oregon now about our police brutality and reform work. Milad, I send you so much love and support. This is always a joy to see you. Thea, I can't thank you enough for the incredible work you've done and for keeping us all connected. I am so sorry I have to scoot, but if others can stay, blessings on all of your heads.
Thank you, Rabbi Ariel. Great, wonderful. And Aziz and Milad and Pastor Ali, would you like to stay for another question or two?
That's fine.
Okay.
Sure, I'm good.
Great. I wanted to, Pastor Ali, we had talked before about your experience that I wanted to make sure we got to in this conversation. You have shared with me about the racial violence, how racial violence in the United States traumatizes Black and Brown children, and that you have experienced that as a child growing up in Ohio. When you visited House of Hope and met the children, what struck a chord for you as someone who has experienced being a minority in a culture of majority supremacy?
Well, I think, and thank you, Thea, for the question. It really made me kind of travel back in time a little bit and reminded me of some of those dark times and yet some times of joy as well. Growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, during a time when there was not only the internal household abuse occurring, but the external abuse through police officers and that type of thing. And so one of the interesting things, I'm not sure that most are aware, and I'm sure that if people much smarter than myself have written about this stuff, but it has to do with kind of what we would call a double whammy. So we are, as a people of color, Black folks, have incurred not only the internal violence of not having the right place, not being of the right color, not being in the right neighborhood. Not only have we experienced all of the ramifications of that and being on the lower economic end of the spectrum, that in itself has created issues with families where you have alcoholism and drugs, and not to play victim here, but it's a necessary outcome, or I should say a negative outcome of those kinds of experiences. Well, on top of that, when you have young kids, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids that go out into the neighborhood that are coming out of homes that have stuff going on, you have those kids encountering police, and not all policemen are bad policemen, but those that are not the best officers that are out there, and the encounter with those officers, it can be very, 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 very negative, very bad for a child growing up. I grew up in a neighborhood. I never had a negative encounter from a police officer all my life. I think the only encounter I've ever had that was close to being negative was a stop by a police officer with about 5 years ago, just traveling up the road. And it was a little scary because there was a shootings in other parts of the country, and that tension was there. And so here these officers were stopping me because they saw me pull over, and they wanted to know why. And they both had their guns ready to go. And I very calmly, because I had been taught from a childhood that you get stopped, you put your hands on the steering wheel at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and you hold your hands there, and you always stop in a lighted area, and you don't do anything unless you ask for permission. If your driver's license, it's in my pocket, officer. Are you giving me permission to get my wallet out? It's in my glove compartment or whatever. So all of that stuff, you're trained early on to do those kinds of things in order, those are life survival type things in order to make sure that you're able to make it. Well, that in itself now will create some level of trauma, combination of internal stuff and external. It creates a kind of a trauma that a lot of kids grow up with. And depending on how you navigate that, you can end up going into a cycle where you start acting out. And I see that with a lot of people in the African-American culture, where you're in a situation where you came up through that, you're very angry now. And so you act out in every time an officer, you see all police officers as Officer Chauvin, you see all police officers as bad people that will do something. So that kind of thing, where you broad brush. What kept me and what continues to keep me was, one, my faith early on coming into the church. And then two, I actually went into the military. I think I shared it with you, Thea. I went into the military, Air Force. And so I spent 6 years in the Air Force. And so that experience helped kind of allow me to kind of recognize that it's okay to be from different parts of the world and different parts. Everybody is in this one military unit, and you all have one purpose. And that kind of started putting the singleness of purpose kind of concept, even though it was within the military construct, that singleness of purpose, regardless of what color, what background, what part of the country. There I was in the shower, all 15 of us, with this person yelling at us saying, get out of there in 3 minutes. We didn't care who was white, black, brown, or yellow. We just know that we need to get our showers and get out of there. So that kind of experience kind of helped me get to a place of being accepting of different people, different backgrounds, and ultimately landed me in a place where, as a minister of reconciliation, I'm always seeking to bring people together, But yeah, I don't know if I answered it fully for you there, Thea, but.
Yeah, thank you, Pastor. Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah, sure, please.
It's just, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking of my experience in the US, and I have to say I have a similar experience to you coming here, and it was very surreal in some ways, because in Jerusalem, everywhere I went, you get stopped, you get searched, you get patted, all of that, a body search everywhere I went. When I flew in the airports, I got, we joke about it, the VIP treatment, special rooms, stripped like literally naked before you get on the plane, all of that. And so I grew up with police always treating me horrible. And then I came to the US, and my experience here has been amazing in comparison, at least. I've never had any, well, I've had a couple of small things, but nothing in comparison to what I had in Israel. And I realized after a while that I went from being the oppressed to being the privileged person. And it's very easy, the moment I became the privileged person in the US, to not pay attention to those who are not privileged, because suddenly you don't have the problem. I'm not the one who's being stopped by the police. I have really good experience, so everybody else must be having a good experience. Yes. And I think I understood what Israelis go through being there more than ever, because they don't see, they don't hear, they don't experience what I experience. And therefore, when I tell my story, so often they're looking at me like, but that's not what we experience. How is it like that? And now in the US, I'm the one who doesn't hear doesn't experience those things. And suddenly I'm like, okay, now I get why they have all these doubts, why they don't always can empathize, they don't always understand. And I think it's really important for all of us, at least this is a lesson I learned, is just because I have become the privileged person to not give up on those who are not, to not stop fighting for justice for those who are not to make it only about me, but this is a cause, not a personal fight.
Absolutely. Can I transport you over to my church and have you say that?
Absolutely. Anytime. I'm
Hey,
happy to.
You're hitting it right on the head. And I think yeah, there is right now within the U.S., of course, there's this mindset. There are certain words that become trigger words of lately, and if you use those words, then it will put you in a certain kind of political camp. So the moment you say privilege, then there's a whole camp of people that will say, oh, you must be very progressive. You must be very liberal because you're using the word privilege. We don't use that word privilege because there's no such thing as privilege. And it's exactly the reason that you say, Aziz, the fact of the matter is, I've had conversations with some of my brothers and sisters here, with European backgrounds, and they say, well, that's never been my experience. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, it's been mine. And I tell you something that happened recently. I was having a conversation with someone, and I indicated to them that anytime I go in the store and I'm asked, do I want the receipt? I say, of course, yes, please give me my receipt. And the person was looking at me kind of wondering where I was going with the story. And I said, do you know why I ask for my receipt every single time? And the person said, no. I said, because it establishes on that receipt, it's a timestamp that I was here at this time. So that if something should come up 3 or 4 hours from now that said, oh, you were robbing a bank or you were breaking in a house, we have evidence that then I could say, nope, I've got my receipt here. And my receipt puts me at this place. See, that's not something that a privileged person necessarily would think, but I have to think about things like that. I have to think about if I go into a store and if it's a jewelry store, make sure that I'm far enough into the store so it doesn't look like I'm going to run out of the store or something and grab something. So if I want to see something, a watch or something, I'm accustomed. It's easy. You see 3 or 4 some of the store security people, they will move up, and I could be dressed in a nice shirt, nice clothing, but it's that suspicion of always kind of you're being watched. And so I saw it when I went to Jerusalem. I saw at one point we were crossing one area, I can't remember, and I saw this, looked like he was no more than about 12 years old, and he was being stopped by these IDF soldiers, and it's like, what are they doing with him? He looks like he's maybe 12 years old, but it looked very serious from a distance that they were looking at him as though he was a potential threat. And I said, interesting. This feels like something that you would see in the States. So and I know there's arguments that there's a whole different conversation about the whole Black versus Palestinian, where are the connection points, and is it racism, is it nationalism, and all that, and I get that. That's a different, but principally, and to some level, the level of oppression it's still there, and it's as you described just now. It's something you can't get around. It's there, and people that are not part of it tend to don't see it.
Right.
Thanks, guys. It's wonderful to hear both of you, and thank you for sharing those insights. It's really grateful to be able to listen. And it's about 1:15, so we should probably end it here, but thank you so much for joining us. Milad's Wi-Fi, our West Bank Wi-Fi cut out. So we've got a good hour of solid Wi-Fi from Eizariya. That's a win. So
Yep, that's not common.
yes. So Thank you, everyone. This conversation is being recorded. It'll be provided to everyone on our email list and all participants, so people can listen offline at any time they wish. And thank you for joining us for this conversation. There will be more to come in the months ahead. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Aziz, and thank you,
Thank you,
Pastor.
Thea.
Thank you, Thea.
Take care.
Blessing.
Blessings to you too.